What a week this has been. I mean, wow. I really can't wait to share what happened in the studio over the weekend because we recorded a beautiful new song with my band, and this time I got the opportunity to push the boundary and try something totally new. And I super thrilled to share this track with you guys when it's out. Still in work in progress, but a lot of things are already kind of done, and it's epic. Hence, I'm delayed making this video, and I hope you'll understand that. Anyway, my name is Varun from the Red Music Box. Welcome back to this new video episode. Thank you for staying with me through this journey, this short journey that I've had since March 2020. And it's awesome to get to talk to you guys through this platform each week and hear from you all in the comments each week as well. So thank you for subscribing to the channel. If you haven't done so, then do consider doing it now. It'll mean a lot. And leave your precious comments because I am reading every comment, and your comments helps me understand what are some of the areas that you're struggling with, and I can make videos and share my experience and my knowledge that I've gained so far with regards to that. So thank you so much. Anyway, today's topic is a very important topic again because I'm about to discuss one of the most important plugin that you need to know about, you need to understand, and more importantly, have the right kind of a mindset to approach this plugin, because this happens to be the most common plugin that often gets overused or underused or abused in the process of mixing. And people have asked me about this and said that they struggle with this plugin and they're not sure how to even approach this. So here's a video where I'm about to break it down. It's quite vast, so it may not get done in this video itself, may bleed into another video, but in any which way, it's going to be worth your while. I can guarantee you that. And thanks for staying with me till now. Let's dive into this without any further delay. I'm sure you have come across EQ or equalizer, especially if you were born in the 80s or 90s and you happen to have a music player at your home and you played around with those little faders, or if you had one of those slightly digital triple disc systems, then you could select different profiles like rock, pop, jazz, dance, and many different things, which changed the way the sound was coming out of the speakers. And it kind of made it a little funny, sometimes a little weird, and that's what an EQ actually is. In simple terms, EQ is a volume knob. But instead of pushing the volume of the entire track, for example, you throw in an EQ on, let's say, a guitar track. You record a guitar and you put an EQ on that. Instead of pushing the volume of the entire guitar, what if you could push the volume of specific frequencies only and not have the entire track get louder, or cut down specific frequencies only? Now that's what an EQ does. Why would you do that? If you're super new to this, then let me break this down even more. Human hearing range happens to be between 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, meaning we can hear any kind of sound that happens to be within that frequency range. However, in reality, because of the damage that our ears go through every single day, yes, even if you're not a loud music listener, even if you don't go to concerts, even if you don't visit clubs, even if you don't do all of those, your ears will still go through damage. Maybe not as significant as somebody who is always exposed to loud music or loud sounds, but you're still going through damage. And it affects our hearing range. The 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz soon becomes lesser, and it varies from one person to another. Now, why does this matter to us? Have you ever wondered, while listening to music, how different musical elements come together and they blend so well, creating this awesome and beautiful impact on you? Sometimes takes you to a different place, helps you revisit a certain memory and relive those beautiful memories. It's awesome how music can do that to you. But when many instruments start speaking at the same time around the same frequency range, it sounds like cacophony. We can't quite hear what's happening and we can't quite differentiate between one instrument to another. It becomes a huge mess. So EQ helps us make space for all the different instruments, either by cutting down the frequencies that we don't want to hear, that sounds a bit harsh and unpleasant to our ears, or boosting or increasing frequencies on individual tracks which sound pleasing to our ears and makes those specific instruments stand out while having the other instruments playing along with it. That's kind of what EQ does or helps you do. It is the single most important plugin which helps you allow all the different instruments and vocals and all the things that you put into your music to coexist with each other and help all of that sound really good and blend really well. Hence, it is one of the single most important plugin that you have to learn to use, and you need to know why, when to use, and what is the right mindset. Now, what do I mean when I talk about mindset? What is this mindset behind an EQ? How to use an EQ. Now, this is where most part of misleading and misinformation or too much information happens, and it gets really overwhelming, and most people still seem to have a lot of doubt about EQ despite tons and tons of videos on the internet which talks about this subject. Hence, I wanted to talk about the mindset of EQ. First thing, before you start using an EQ, you need to be quick to listen to your track and slow to start using your EQ. And what do I mean by that? Start listening to your track, pay close attention to every instrument to try and understand what is wrong with this track. Now, if you took the pain and paid careful attention while you were recording your song, then chances are you achieved a really good tone in your recording itself. Now, why would you want to change that? Now, despite recording things really well, there are chances that you may need to fix or change or modify certain things so that the other instruments can coexist a little better than what they do without using an EQ. Truth is, most music producers or engineers, if you've seen them work, would grab an EQ the moment you throw in a track in front of them, or you might be doing this yourself. Grab an EQ, start cutting frequencies, start boosting frequencies, almost the very moment the track starts playing, or almost sometimes the very moment they start importing tracks. I've even had people do this where I've seen you give them a session, they open the session even before they do a static balance, or even before they understand what's happening in the song, they throw in an EQ, start cutting down frequencies, all kinds of stuff. And this shows two things. Either the engineer that you're watching do all these things is so experienced that he or she knows exactly what to do even before playing a track. Sounds a bit crazy. I don't buy that, which is why the second part, cluelessness. Absolutely being clueless and doing things because somebody said something on the internet, or someone said, hey, if you get a vocal track, you have to cut so-and-so frequency because that's kind of how it works. Or if you get a bass track or you get a drum track, you have to cut so-and-so frequencies, or you have to boost so-and-so frequencies because that's how that works. And I think when it comes to using an EQ, that's a completely wrong mindset to use. Instead, listen to the track, make note of what is wrong with it. What do you want the track to sound like? What is lacking? Is it sounding too muffled? Is it sounding too harsh? Is something not standing out because it's getting lost behind some other track or behind some other instrument? Is something masking another instrument or another element, musical element in your track too much? Then how can you bring that little bit of separation? So try to write these things down. And that really helps you understand what are you expecting out of your EQ and what are you supposed to do even before you make a single move, even before you add an EQ plugin on your track in the first place. Sometimes a simple volume movement can fix the problem. You may not even need to grab an EQ. You may not even need to grab and pull certain frequencies down. All you need to do is maybe just push the volume knob up or down and it could fix the problem. So it's very important to understand and get a good balance, a good static mix before you start throwing EQ on your tracks. Now, if you haven't checked out a video series I did a little while ago where I talk about a practical step for a good song, starting from a composition stage all the way to mastering. And what I'm talking about right now happens to be one of the elements in the mixing stage. So I highly recommend go and check that entire series because there are nuggets and tips in that which will help you make this process of EQing super duper simple, because there are so many things that you need to do even before you grab an EQ plugin or even before you start mixing your track to help your song sound really good. So do go through that series if you haven't done that. I'm going to leave a link below in the description or link it up here on the annotation. So do check it out. Now, how do we use an EQ? As you understand, the human hearing range is between 20 Hz to 20 kHz, and we can subdivide this frequency range into 3 different categories, starting with a low frequency, then a high frequency at the absolute top, and anything in between these low and highs are your middle frequencies or the mid frequencies. Now, some people would like to subdivide this a little more further and they want to look at it slightly more microscopically, and that is the low frequencies gets subdivided into sub lows and lows. The mid frequencies gets divided into the low mids, the mids and the upper mids, or some people just do a low mids and upper mids or a high mids, and the highs remain as highs, and some people like to call it air. Beyond a certain frequency range, they just call it air. Now, is it important that you need to know all these subdivisions? Not really. You don't need to know all of that. As long as you are able to do even a basic thing of low frequencies, mid frequencies, and high frequencies, you're fairly in a good place to start with it. Now, when you open an EQ plugin, you will find filters, you'll find shelves, and you'll find parametric EQ bands. Now, these are 3 different things that you'll find in an EQ plugin. Let's quickly open a plugin and check out what these look like. Okay, here's a quick session where I've loaded a couple of random loops. One is a drum and the other is a guitar and piano. And I've loaded a default EQ plugin from within Logic Pro 10 or Logic Pro X. Let's look at what are the different things that you see in an EQ as soon as you fire up. The first thing is you see the frequency range, as I mentioned, 20 Hz being the lowest and 20 kHz being the highest. And we have different kinds of EQ bands here to modify this sound. The first thing we see is a low cut, or also known as a high pass, or a high cut, also known as a low pass, on the other side of the spectrum. And what this does is it cuts off everything below the frequency that you have set this to. Right now it is set at 20 kHz, so it's kind of not cutting anything, but it's just cutting things below 20, which we can't quite hear anyway. But let's move this and see what happens with this drum example. You see, the low frequency starts disappearing, and as you keep moving forward, and there's something called a dB per octave written right below. What does that do? It's basically dictating the slope, how steep or how smooth it's going to be. Right now, it's cutting 12 dB for every octave. Every musical octave is cutting down 12 decibels. Let's move this up, and you see the steep. The curve gets steeper, and now let's try the same thing and see what happens. Let me try to make this curve not so steep, keeping it at the same frequency, and you'll start hearing the difference. And then the value that you see below here actually accentuates the part where you are cutting off. So when I increase this and push, oh, sorry, there you go. Let's make it 12 dB per octave. And now what happens is the point that's 274 Hertz onwards where it starts cutting off, it puts a little boost just around that frequency range, creating a little resonance. You often hear this very clearly when you're using synthesizers. People love using this. Kind of used a lot in the electronic form of music, of course. And something similar happens with the high cut or the low pass as well. In this case, it cuts off everything beyond the frequency that you have set here. And the dB per octave dictates the slope, and this dictates the Q, or that little boost just around that cutoff frequency as it affects in the low cut or the high passes. As you see that, now let's look at a little guitar example, and let's look at what the shelves do here. Now the next thing we look at is the shelves. Shelves look like a little outside facing brackets, and what they basically do is help you increase or decrease all the frequencies below the set value. The same thing happens on the high shelf, where you can increase or decrease all the frequencies beyond the shelf value, the frequency value. Let's try and take a look at this. Again, remember, these are really stupid and drastic examples that I'm showing. I don't think you'll end up using this sort of an EQ, especially if you've got a really good recording in the first place. So again, I'm showing these drastic examples so that you understand how it works. I'm taking a piano loop now, and we're going to play around with the 4 parametric bands that we have within this EQ. All the parametric bands behaves the same way. Each of them are assigned to different frequency ranges, but remember, you can always move them wherever you want. So you don't need to use all 4. You can either use it or not use it, but the behavior remains the same. So the top number here that we see affects the frequency that we are going to be modifying. So right now I'm setting it to 300 Hertz. There we go. So what it does is, when you select the frequency and start pushing or pulling this value up or down, you're boosting the frequency by so many decibels as shown here, or cutting the frequency by so many decibels as shown here. And the Q factor is telling you how narrow is this cut or boost going to be. Meaning, is it only going to affect the frequency that you have chosen, or is it going to affect the neighboring frequencies as well. And sometimes when you're boosting, the usual thumb rule is that you try and keep the cue fairly broad so that it sounds more natural. And when you're cutting, the thumb rule is usually to keep the cue narrow so that you're not affecting all the neighboring frequencies and taking some of the other goodness within the sound itself. But again, that's general rule, but doesn't mean you've got to stick with it. But that's generally how, if you're getting started, it's a good place to start off. I hope this gave you a basic enough understanding of what are the different things within an EQ, the filters, the shelves, and the 4 parametric bands that you have available, and how you can use them to modify the given sounds within your session. Wow, if that was too much information, I completely understand. There are a lot more questions with regards to EQ, and as I said, it's going to be a long video, so I'm planning to divide this into multiple videos, maybe 2 or maybe 3. I'm not sure how many videos, but if you have questions such as why are there so many different types of EQ if this is what every EQ plugin does, and how do you understand what are the right frequencies to cut or boost, and why is EQ, why is the context so important when you're using an EQ? Now, a lot of these questions are valid and they're right and they're true. It's great if you're asking these questions. And we're going to discuss all of these things in the next video episode. So hang in there, stay tuned for the next one. Thank you so much for joining me on this video episode. And my name is Varun from the Red Music Box. And do not forget to create, play, and record. Hey, wait. If you forgot to subscribe, then please do hit that subscribe button below and ding the bell and leave your comments, please, because I'm reading every comment. Thanks.